Cadillac. We're back to square one. I drove this thing to Saratoga Springs yesterday. Actually, I drove it there the day before to Cohoes, and I drove it back last night, and it performed flawlessly, didn't skip a beat. I turned the key this morning, and it sputtered for a second. I said, oh, needs a little bit of gas. So I tapped the gas, and here I am, cranking that baby up. What the heck is going on? I got my Cadillac wing nut. And I don't know how this thing could have flooded with 1 3/4 press of the gas, but I drove this thing 250 miles and it didn't skip a beat for a second. So I don't understand why it's so finicky. Oh, a little bullseye in the windshield. Oh, come on. Wants more gas. I don't want to give it more gas. It's going to get flooded. And I was working on that G30 van that's way back there, the one I drove back from Denver 4 years ago or so. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I don't want to turn it off because last time I did it, it wouldn't restart. Every time I look at this thing, I see more rust. Rust. Exhaust leak. Why is it leaking exhaust? Right there. Drove it to Saratoga Springs. It wasn't very warm, 55, 60 degrees, 15 Celsius. Look at these old steel melted Uniroyals. These were junk when they were new, and these are far from new. They are Treadwear 220 Traction B. They are a little cracked, or a lot cracked. Wonder how old these are. No vibration whatsoever. On the way back, I stopped to get gas, and there was an air pump, free air. I said, you know, let me be a big spender, a sport, and I'll put in some free air. Oh, come on, fast idle, go down. Can't stand it when the fast idle's racing away. Afraid to turn it off and not restart. Anyhow, see if I can find a date code on these babies. I'll tell you what I did. Date code, come on. Come on. Date code. No date code? Gotta be a date code. 235, 75, 15s. Rust. Gotta be a DOT number. Load range. Maximum inflation. Oh well. So, I stopped at a gas station, got some gas. They had free air, so I said, that tire looks a little soft. And I said, I already had one blowout. Who needs more trouble? And it's worn on the side, but no vibration, no nothing. Maybe you leave well enough alone. I put on the air meter, the air tower, and it said it had 21 pounds. And what do they call for in the sticker in the door? They call for 28 pounds. Front 28, rear 24. Reduced load, front 27, rear 20. Can you believe they call for 20 pounds of air? Can you believe it? It had 21 and it was warm. I was going slow. So I filled it up to 40. I put 40 in all the tires. And this one was missing the valve cap, which means that it probably has a very slow leak. But these tires are done. I wonder how old they are. I got a spare, but it's a space saver. Anyhow, let's talk about this. So my landlord neighbor has been driving this van, not very much. He doesn't drive much, 1,000, 2,000 miles a year at most. It's just a work truck. He doesn't use it in the winter. So he said to me a couple of weeks ago, he says it had trouble starting. You turned the key and you had to jiggle it, or it wouldn't start. Then it did start. So I came over and I turned the key. Don't tell anybody where the key is. I turned the key and lo and behold, it was dead. And he said, well, maybe the battery's no good. I said, no, I put a new battery in 3 years ago. I think it's good. I checked the connections. Everything was nice and greased up with anti-seize. And I crawled underneath. And it's really easy on this G30 van, which is why I bought it. Nice Chevy van. He actually had a Dodge van that he bought new, probably in the 90s. It was a big one. Might have been a 15 passenger. I put a new starter in, professionally rebuilt by a friend of a friend's starter shop. So I jumped it. I jumped the solenoid to the hot battery cable and it cranked immediately. I said, well, I bet you the starter's good. So anyhow, this fellow here with this van, he ordered a brand new Dodge van probably 25 years ago. And I asked him, do you want an automatic shift? He says, no, I prefer a manual shift. Less trouble. So he had a 4-speed Dodge van with the, I'll show you where the shifter was. I saw the van briefly 10, 15 years ago before he scrapped it. The shifter was over here. The shifter was over here. Swear to God, how often do you see that? He wanted a shifter van and the engine failed when the harmonic balancer broke off or fell off or unscrewed. He said they tried to weld it back on, whatever. So what's happened here, I'll try to show you what happened. Dig into my pocket. I had my little flashlight and I lost it and somebody found it and gave it back to me and I haven't seen it since. Go figure what that means. When you find something and then lose it a minute later. So I crawled underneath here and I said, well, the dimmer switch is a switch mounted over here. And usually on the Chevys, the Suburbans and the K5s and such, the ignition switch, not the key lock, but the electrical switch is mounted just below it. So you have to take off the dimmer switch. And I looked and I didn't see it. I said, oh, it must be different. So I looked over here and I saw this plunger relay, solenoid, whatever it is, and there was a cable that ran to it. And when you turn the key, this plunger thing went clunk, 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 clunk. Well, I touched the two wires together and wouldn't you know it, I shorted something. I saw a tiny spark and now it doesn't work. So he has the shop manual. I looked on YouTube. There's no videos discussing nothing on G10, 20, or 30 vans. Turns out this is the shift interlock, I think. So I don't know what I did or didn't do to it, but I touched those two wires together with a little trusty paper clip and I popped something. But we digress. I'd like to know what I did. What fuse I blew. Anyways, there's the ignition electrical switch. This is what sends all the juice when you turn the key over here. So I took the switch off and it's really hard to get to. You gotta stick your hand in here, pop off the shifter, cable over here and move the shifter down and you pop that off and you take in a 5/16 or 11/32 socket. I think it's a 5/16. You take off the switch and I disconnected the two connectors that are in there and they're hard to get to. And I took the switch apart by popping these two little locking tabs off. And of course I did it upside down the wrong way and all the little springs fell out in the contacts. I put it all back together. I figured it out. I'm not very good at that. I put it all back together and I connected it and I turned the key I didn't turn the key. I put a screwdriver in the slot here where the rod actuates this and she fired right up. So I said, well, there's your problem. The switch has gone bad. And somehow when I put it back together, I fix things, but we don't trust it, especially since it's hard to get to. And if it leaves him stranded, what's he going to do? Have this thing towed back with a load full of mattresses and branches and discarded furniture and the like. So I've got to get a new switch. I'm going to order one from Rock Auto. They're $25 plus shipping. I've got a few other things to order from Rock Auto. But if anybody knows what this is and what circuit I short-circuited when I touched these two contacts together, it says shift interlock. And when I turned the key, I noticed that the plunger was plunging. There's a cable on it. So I've never seen this before, nor do I really know what it does. I don't know what I did. But those wires go somewhere. I'm not good on 12 volts. So like I said, I touched those two wires together. I saw a tiny spark, and maybe there's a fuse or something that I tripped, but it's no longer working. And I wish I could show you better. little cable. There's a cable. Oh, come on, go away. There's a cable there. There's a plunger, and it goes chunk, 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 chunk. So I screwed something up. I'm not the best and the brightest. So that's the story with the G30 van. I brought it back 4 or 5 years ago from Denver. It had 107,000. Now it's got 114, so 7,000 miles in 4 years. It's had a couple thousand miles a year. I think I drove it most of those miles when I brought it back across the country. I went to Florida, to Miami, fixed the air conditioning, put in some 134, and had a nice drive with it. I'll show you something that I did do to it. I did a modification. It wasn't easy. I changed the tie rod end in the parking lot in Miami, and I put these bolts on to make the seat. Where's that light? Right there. I put these bolts on, and I attached the stud that came out of the seat moving bracket, the seat track, and I put one of those connector studs on for connecting 2 threaded rods together, and I put a lock nut on, and I put a bolt under here with washers, and this took me a couple hours. I was able to lift the front of the seat up about 1.5 inches, which at the beginning was kind of weird, but then I got used to it and it was much better. Did the same thing over here, and it wasn't easy to get the combination of nuts, bolts, and washers just right, so everything locked in tight, but it tilted the seat. You can't really see it, but it tilted the seat way back, made it much more comfortable to drive. GM had this terrible habit of having seats that were too upright, and if you got short legs or something, well, too bad, so sad, but it sure suits me now. Look how much I raised that up. So that's the long story of the Chevy Sport van. If anybody knows what that shift interlock does or what I screwed up, let me know, and I'm going to go to my shop and find something to do, I'm sure. Always something to do at the OK Corral.